YouTube fam. It's your boy, Jeff Rosado, back at it again with another Sorcery Championship deck tech. This time, accompanied by my boy, Big X.
What's good, my dude? Glad to see you back and looking fresh.
I appreciate that, man. Thank you.
How does it feel to be champ for the third time?
It feels amazing. And as a matter of fact, I have all three championship promos here, each that I've earned myself. I'm honestly shocked that I earned this one. There was a couple of close calls in the tournament. I wasn't even sure myself that I was going to get it. I did also win this fantastic Sorcerer promo done by the legendary Frank Frazetta. And honestly, I gotta say, I do love the fact that these foils actually have a full art back. So, a few of the other promos didn't have that feature, but this is so sweet. It's so awesome, and I'm just thrilled that I won, It feels good to be the champ.
Not gonna lie, you destroyed that tournament.
Some matchups were kind of luck-based, but for the most part, I felt very comfortable piloting the deck that I did.
So what deck did you play?
I actually played Sorcerer, believe it or not.
Sorcerer? Not the Elementalist?
Yeah, no? When I was playing in the tournament, right, I felt like people were expecting me to play Elementalist, but at the same time, I was expecting some of the players to play the decks that they normally play. So I thought to myself, you know what, let me bring in something new to the table to kind of catch everyone off guard, and at the same time, something that I can use to counteract the decks that they were piloting.
Makes sense. What were your matchups?
Yeah, so first round, I went up against 4-element Death Speaker. I went up against Fire Earth Sorcerer. Third round was Earth Druid. Fourth round was Air, Fire, Earth Archmago. And then for the final round, I was up against Haley with her Air, Water, Fairy Sorcerer.
Okay, how well did the decks do against Death Speaker and Archmago? I feel like Dan and Brian are too good with their list.
Honestly, you're absolutely correct. They're both fantastic players, and their decks are just as strong. 4-element Death Speaker, so I felt like that was the hardest matchup, only because it just has so much card advantage the later the game goes on. And Archmago, believe it or not, was actually my easiest matchup.
Really?
Yeah, and even though that matchup was kind of reliant on a little bit of luck, both decks have like this similar interaction where they rely on their graveyard over the course of the game to gain advantage. Death Speaker brings back its Genesis minions, and then Archmago also casts spells from the cemetery. So there's certain interactions that go on over the course of the game, but that being said, I felt as though the more cards a player has, the better that matchup's going to be. And I felt like Sorcerer was perfect for those exact matchups because it just inherently has the ability to draw more spells.
Cool beans. All right, show us this awesome list then.
All right, absolutely. So I guess I will start with my avatar here. I have my custom avatar, which is Sorcerer. So of course I have the front side here. And then on the back, I have a altered painting, which, believe it or not, I actually did this myself.
You made this?
Yeah, I did. It did take some time to make this. It's kind of noticeable when you see the hood, but I wanted something to be just so beautiful and abstract, and I'm actually very happy at how this card turned out. So, there's the avatar. I'm going to go ahead and start off with my artifacts here. So, without any surprise, everyone kind of expected this. I have Ring of Morgan. So Ring of Morgan, it gives the bearer the ability where whenever they cast a spell, it deals 1 damage to a target nearby unit, and then you can gain 1 life. So this is just absolutely ridiculous for the sheer fact that I'm able to deal damage. And gaining life is great too, but the fact that I'm able to deal damage just by casting cards is just too good. Especially when I have Sorcerer to just constantly draw them as spells. So I'm always having cards in my hand to cast.
Makes sense.
Amulet of Niniane. These, of course, are like meta-defining, and of course, almost any deck is going to play this. But right now, I feel like Amulet of Niniane is probably the most important relic right now. And the only reason why is because it says the bearers can be targeted or dealt damage by magic. Why that's so important is because I feel like a lot of removal spells in the game right now are heavily reliant on damage-based interactions. So, for example, Lightning Bolt. It can deal 3 damage to a minion, kill a minion, but at the same time, it can deal damage to an avatar. And at the same time, it can end the game. If you play something like, let's say, Disintegrate, for example, it banishes the minion, but the problem is that if you're going up against Archmago, it doesn't give you the ability to target the Archmago for any interactions. So Amulet is very important because almost all removal spells are in a form of damage, and this prevents you from taking damage from those burn spells.
It's a really good card.
Oh yeah. Now I have Keythera Mechanism, another like meta-defining card right now. It allows the bearer to determine all random outcomes, so my lightning bolts are always going to guarantee their targets, and other random interactions I get to control. It helps me sometimes because my opponent's playing something like Raise Dead. I can actually make that decision for them because I'm the one that determines the random outcomes. It does get a little interesting when my opponent plays their Keythera Mechanism, so then they trade the controller, if that makes sense. So, like, if I have this, I determine all random outcomes. But if my opponent plays theirs, now they determine all random outcomes.
That is very interesting.
It's a very powerful artifact. So these are my 1-drops, and these are all that I'm searching for. Now I have 3 more. I have Panicotic Manuscript. This is really, really good for just the cards that I play with it. It allows the bearer to tap, reveal the topmost spell that I have, and then the bearer of this card takes damage equal to that revealed card's mana cost. So essentially, this is just more card draw. So I have Sorcerer, and I have Panicotic Manuscript, and I have my initial draw for the draw phase. So if I play my cards right, and if I have a good setup, I can essentially draw 3 cards in 1 turn, and that's already game warping by default.
Wow.
Oh yeah. So now I have 2 Golden Harp. This card is insane. So it says strike damage and life loss caused by nearby units is reduced to 2. So in certain cases, and you'll see why I have this in here, this allows me to stay alive a little bit longer in the game, and then while having Ring of Morgan, I'm also able to gain life. And the best part is that this says strike damage and loss of life. It doesn't say anything about dealing damage from spells or by other relics, so this kind of messes up my opponent more than it does me. And the best part is, if I have this near my avatar, while I have my minions on the other side of the board dealing damage, they're not affected by this. So essentially, I'm keeping a defense for myself while simultaneously putting pressure and dealing damage to my opponent.
It could do all that?
Yeah, and it's just ridiculous. It doesn't stack, but the best part is just the fact that I have 2 because I'm able to draw it a little bit quicker. And this is kind of, I think, what I originally based this deck around. I really wanted to have Golden Harp to just keep myself able to draw more cards, last longer in the game, while simultaneously not restricting myself from dealing damage.
Wow.
The last artifact I have is 13 Treasures of Britain. Honestly, this card is probably like the worst card in the deck because it's not as good unless I have Keythera Mechanism with it. So with this combo, essentially, when this is picked up, the bearer's controller draws a card. Then I teleport 13 treasures on top of a random site or void. But with Keythera Mechanism, I can choose where this is going to teleport, allowing me to constantly pick it up and draw more cards. And you're kind of starting to see the theme of this deck. Being able to draw more cards is absolutely vital. And having an avatar like Sorcerer to draw more cards on top of that just can completely warp the game in my favor. So that's it for my artifacts there.
You know, there's one thing I've noticed. Why don't you play Cores or Philosopher's Stone?
Yeah, actually, that's an excellent question. So when I was test playing, the cores sometimes got cloggy in my hand. They were good because they fixed my threshold and helped with mana. And of course, Philosopher's Stone does the same. But the problem is that I didn't want to draw them when I want to draw into more fuel. And if I had to choose which cards to draw in bad situations, it would probably be 13 Treasures or Panicotic Manuscript because these actually just allow me to further progress the game and they almost replace themselves. At least with these, I can have some sort of forceful interaction or defense. Going into my only aura in the deck, I play Atlantean Fate. Atlantean Fate just shuts down my opponent's sights and also at the same time allows me to submerge minions and artifacts. It doesn't really work if my opponent has ordinary sights, which came up a few times in the tournament, but being able to have a board sweep that has just a wide range of disruption is just fantastic. Having this to disrupt my opponent's threshold is sometimes just enough, even if I don't submerge a minion or artifact.
It's a very powerful aura.
Yeah, it's so good. So going into my minions, I have the one Highland Princess. So this is an air, fire, water deck, but this is more of a splash for air. And believe it or not, this is the hardest card in the deck to cast. And it's only because of its double air threshold requirement. But I felt like if I'm playing air, I have to play this card because of just the fact that I can search these powerful artifacts here. If I happen to draw 13 treasures and Highland Princess, I'm set to go because I can search for Cathedral Mechanism. If I'm going up against a fire-based deck, I can use this to search for Amulet and protect myself against burn spells. And then, of course, if all else fails and if I don't know what to get, I'm always going to fall on Ring of Morgan because it's just the most powerful artifact in this deck to search for. So I played 2 Season Sellsword, and this is because of the interaction that I discovered. A lot of people didn't know that I could do this, but with another card that I have in this deck, essentially this card is a combo piece to forcefully discard my opponent's hand. And you guys can kind of see where this is going. But besides that, for 2 mana and having 4 power, this is just fantastic for closing out the game as quickly as possible. And if my opponent happens to discard a card to gain control of it, sometimes it's very bad, but at the same time, it's pretty good because if I have Golden Harp, they're discarding a card just to attack me with only a 2-powered minion, which seems pretty good. Anytime that they're discarding a card just to gain control of a card, doesn't really help benefit them most of the time, unless they're a graveyard interaction deck. I have Violent here. Of course, I'm playing fire, so I have to play Violent. Just being able to kill a minion when it's summoned is just so good. Actually, for the main reason why I even built this deck, I play 4 Tough Turtles. This card is really annoying for like everyone. So the first time that this minion would take damage, it's prevented. So this is fantastic if I have Golden Harp because any damage that's going to be dealt to it will be reduced to 2. However, it'll also prevent that damage as well. So making this very difficult to kill. On top of that, with Panicotic Manuscript, I can use this to tap for its ability. And let's say if I happen to flip 13 treasures, this would normally take 4 damage after I draw the card. But because of its ability, it's actually prevented. So this is a little combo piece that I use alongside Sorcerer to allow me to draw more cards. But it can be annoying for my opponent if I have the right setup. Another annoying card, for my opponent anyways, is Logbog Cat. So this card is 3 mana for 4 power. It can and must be summoned to any nearby water site, or any water site, sorry. So why this is so good is if my opponent's playing something like Color Out of Space, I can summon this to that site and dish out essentially 4 damage off the rip. And what's so good too is that since I do play some mortals, if they're playing Bower of Bliss, it does slow my deck down a little bit. But having Logbog Cat is so great because this doesn't stop that from dishing out 4 damage. And that alongside the Season Sellsword just closes out games so quick. I do have some very powerful minions coming up in the form of Morgana Le Fay and the Lady of the Lake. So, Morgana Le Fay is by far the best spellcaster in my opinion. For the fact that she has spellcaster and stealth, her Genesis ability allows her to draw 3 spells, and it's kept in a separate hand that only she can cast. So this is fantastic because she can cast other spells, but she has her own hand, which is great against like discard abilities, and at the same time, because of stealth, it becomes really hard for my opponent to kill Morgana. And with Lady of the Lake, this is another spellcaster with the ability Submerge, but her Genesis ability is just so good. When she's summoned, I can choose to summon a mortal or artifact from my cemetery to her location, and if I do, I shuffle her back into the spellbook. The only reason why that's so important is because I'm able to get back my artifacts if I survive a disenchant, and at the same time, all the mortals that I have really good Genesis abilities that I can recur and bring back. So these two were just absolutely fantastic. The only issue I have is that their thresholds are too high. I have 3 water and 3 fire, and originally that's what this deck was water and fire. And even with the mana base, sometimes it was difficult just to get 3 of each to cast. And so that's why I say Highland Princess is definitely the hardest card to cast in this deck, because you're really trying to facilitate fire and water threshold, and air comes last. I have 3 Sea Raiders and then 1 Captain Baldassar. These cards are actually ridiculous. So essentially, Sea Raiders says whenever it attacks and kills an enemy, the defending player discards their topmost spell, and then I can choose to cast that spell without using Threshold. So this is crazy because sometimes I'll flip a Philosopher's Stone and then I'm able to cast that just essentially practically for free. Of course, I still have to spend the mana for it, but just for the fact that if I already have this in play, if I don't cast anything in the turn and I use Sorcerer to draw a spell, I'm now gaining an advantage in cards, but at the same time, Sea Raider can cast my opponent's spells. And the significance of that is the fact that I'm not losing cards in my hand while still progressing the game.
Man, that is crazy even effect.
Oh yeah, and if you thought that was crazy, Captain Baldassar is just as good, if not even better. Because when Captain Baldassar attacks a unit or a site, the controller discards 3 of their top spells, and then I can choose to cast each of those spells, ignoring the threshold requirements. The same exact thing with Sea Raider. The only difference, though, is that I'm able to discard 3 spells instead of the 1. So, and the best part is that Sea Raider has to successfully kill an enemy. Captain Baldassar just has to land an attack on a unit or a site, which is fantastic. So it's slightly better, but the fact that I'm able to play these 4 cards, essentially it's upping the count while still allowing me to cast my opponent's cards and further progress the game. This is actually what I use to beat Archimago. This one singular card right here is Bodisha. So this card is so powerful. Other allies have +3 power while successfully attacking sites. So yeah, if I position my minions in a way where I know my opponent doesn't have enough minions to block, playing this card at the right time means that those minions will get +3. And sometimes, if you play your cards right, you can essentially put your opponents on death's door in 1 attack.
Wow. That's pretty crazy.
Oh yeah. So now I have Ruler Thul. Of course, Ruler Thul is essentially just as good as Bodisha. So it has charge, allows all my allies to attack as if the top and bottom edges of the realm are connected, and then all allies there get +1 power. So essentially, if my opponent's hiding behind their sites all the way from across to the board, I can play Ruler Thul and then close the distance and attack. The best part is that this also works for Sorcerer. So I'm able to dish out a bunch of power. There was one time where I had Golden Harp, and essentially what I did was I dropped the Golden Harp, was able to attack a Ruler Thul. My opponent was playing more minions and they were getting a little aggressive. I decided to retreat back, and then I used this to pick up the Golden Harp. And then when they tried to initiate, the Golden Harp to stay alive a little bit long enough for me to play Bodisha, and then I was able to dish out a ton of damage back at my opponent. Yeah, it's very interesting the control that this deck can do while also simultaneously dishing out a crap ton of damage. So for the most broken card in the deck, I have Courtesan Thias. So this card combos with the Seasoned Sellsword, and essentially what happens is if I have Seasoned Sellsword and I attack my opponent, dish out 4 damage, and then if I play Courtesan Thias, I get to control my opponent on the next turn, and then since their avatar is nearby to Seasoned Sellsword, I can have them constantly reactivate this ability, discarding their entire hand. Yes, this is exactly how the interaction works. I remember a long time ago, like when Alpha was just released, I made a Death Speaker deck list that showcased this combo. Everyone didn't believe that it worked that way. It does in fact work this way, and I was the first player to ever discover this interaction, and since then I've been playing it almost any time I play Seasoned Sellsword.
So you're the one who pioneered that effect.
Yeah, absolutely. Or the combo, more or less. But Courtesan Thias is just so broken for so many reasons. Of course, Genesis, during their next turn, each player is controlled by the previous one. So on my opponent's turn, I get to control them, which is the most important thing because I get to control them first. Yes, my opponent gets to control me, but usually by the time I play Courtesan Thias, this wins me the game on the spot. Because ideally what I want to do is put my opponent on death's door using Log Bobcat, Seasoned Sellsword, all my minions, and then I play Courtesan Thias, gain control of their turn, and force their avatar to attack my minion, and then they lose the game because they're already on death's door by the time I take their turn.
That's crazy,
It's
man.
too good. It's too good. And now I've gotten it to the point where my opponent will never get a chance to control me on my turn. And sometimes, maybe I will have that interaction, but usually if I do, I don't really have that many good cards in my hand. But by the time I play Courtesan Thias, it's game over. Technically, by the time I play any of these cards, it spells out game over by the time they're entering play.
Very strong minions compared to earlier.
Oh, yeah. And I guess the strongest minion that I have out of all of these is, of course, the legendary Death Dealer.
Oh, man.
Oh, yeah. Genesis, kill all other minions. It doesn't matter if they're submerged, burrowed, whatever. They're going to die as soon as the sensors play, which is fantastic. If I have Lady of the Lake, sometimes I will just bring back the Death Dealer just to destroy everything. And essentially, he's the last minion on board, and with 4 power, he's going to close out the game as quickly as possible. You can technically use any of these minions in interactions. Playing Death Dealer to board sweep, play Ruler of Thul alongside Death Dealer to dish out a ton of damage, and then finally playing Courtesan Thias to essentially gain control of my opponent, force them to attack these powerful minions, and close out the game.
That is really strong setup, man.
Yes, sir. So that's it for my minions. I'm just going to kind of move these to the side a little bit, make some room here. So for my spells, I actually have, I guess, another card that really helped me win against Archmago. So I play Plague of Frogs. This is actually the most insane combo piece I have in this deck. It essentially does everything. So what I did against Archmago was I knew that they had Poison Nova in their graveyard, and I knew that they were going to cast it back with Archmago's ability. So what I did was I played Plague of Frogs here, moved my minions as close as I could to dish out as much damage to them. On their turn, they had to tap Archmago to play a site, and then they were able to use Poison Nova. And then what ended up happening on my next turn, I ended up summoning Bodisha because all of these frogs were alive, and then each one swung for 3 damage. So 7 times 3 equals 21. So in one attack, I was able to put them on death's door, and it was over from there. So sometimes the best way to beat a deck is just to beat it in one shot, right?
Yeah, that would make sense.
Plague of Frogs is also insane for the fact that it provides me defense because I'm able to summon them all over the place. If my opponent happens to use Atlantean Fate to submerge my artifacts, I can actually use the Frog's Submerge to grab my artifacts, bring them up to the surface, and then have my avatar pick them up. And lastly, I can also use these with Panacotic Manuscript and 13 Treasures of Britain. I kid you not, there was a time I used this, I drew a spell, 13 Treasures with Kythera, had this to draw an extra 7 cards because all of these picked them up, and I also gave it to my Sorcerer to pick up another card. So let's do the math. 1 from Sorcerer, 8 from Treasures, so that's 9 cards, and then use Panacotic Manuscript on each of the 7 frogs. So 9 plus 7, I drew 16 cards in one game.
16 cards?
16 cards. If you're
That's
able to
a lot.
draw that many cards in a game, for one, it's completely broken. And 2, it just completely snowballs the game. You're just always going to out-resource your opponent. And if you happen to have Sea Raiders or Captain Balthasar, you don't have to spend any of those cards. You can just keep drawing cards every turn while using the Captain Balthasar and Sea Raider to cast your opponent's cards against them.
It's really good, man. Really, really good.
So I have 3 Shrink, and I have 2 Polymorph. You guys don't get the frog trend. So now Shrink and Polymorph essentially just set base power to 0. Polymorph is better because when you transform a target nearby minion, it's actually banished. So that helped me against Deathspeaker because they're not able to resurrect any minions from their cemetery. And of course, Shrink can actually be used on your opponent's avatar and turn their base power to 0. And why this is so good is because this allows you to essentially kill any big minion. If your opponent has something like a Logbog Cat, Infernal Legion, what say you, you can use Shrink, set it to 0, Summon a Violent, uses Genesis ability to just kill it.
Oof.
And that's the best case scenario. And yeah, so these are just in here essentially just to get rid of big beefy minions. For the rest of the deck, I have 4 Lightning Bolt, 4 Fire Bolts.
Oof.
So these essentially are just my removal spells. Lightning Bolt I think is the better one because Lightning Bolt still allows you to hit a minion with stealth. So I have seen a few players play Morgana throughout the weekend, and it having stealth means that it's hard to target. So with Lightning Bolt, it actually targets the location. It doesn't target the minion. So this is going to be able to target the location and then deal damage to that minion, if it's the only one. But with Kithira Mechanism, you can always just guarantee what the random outcome is going to be.
Okay, that's actually really good too.
Oh yeah, especially with Shrink and Polymorph. If I reduce the power level of a minion, and then if I use Firebolt, I'm able to just kill anything essentially, and then just go forward from there. And now we're at a trifecta loop here, because what I've noticed is that if people are playing Amulet of Niniane, it's to prevent them from dying from burn spells. But burn spells are great for killing minions and at the same time putting my opponents on death's door. So I also have Disenchant. Disenchant is the missing piece because you need to essentially play this to get over Amulet of Niniane. And of course, it helps you get rid of any auras that are problematic or just any artifacts in general. But if your opponent has Amulet of Niniane, these aren't really going to work against it. So you need to have this to essentially destroy the amulet, and then you can deal damage to your opponent, further facilitating your strategy. You can think of it like rock, paper, scissors. You have rock, paper, and then you have scissors, right? And that's what I feel like the meta is adapting to more, because they're starting to realize that burn spells are the more universal removal, and then amulet is probably like the perfect answer to stop these burn spells from getting out of hand. And then, of course, playing Disenchant and Dispel just allows you to get rid of the amulet. Honestly, Disenchant was the reason why I upped the air, because yes, I wanted to play Highland Princess to search out these artifacts, but I really wanted to play Disenchant just for the fact that it's essentially a staple in this meta right now. For some fun tech, my last 3 cards are 2 Replication and 1 Mesmerism. So Replication conjures a copy of an artifact carried by the caster. You still have to pick it up, but what is so amazing is that I'll use Replication, replicate my Amulet of Niniane, and conjure it on a site nearby my avatar. My opponent's playing Disenchant, they're going to obviously destroy the artifacts that I have on my avatar, but they can't destroy the other location where the amulet resides. So I'm able to move my avatar to pick up the second copy of the amulet. And that may not seem like much, but this is just a ridiculous interaction that really can make the difference of a game. Because if my opponent's just playing nothing but burn spells, and if they waste their only resource to get rid of amulet, this just allows me to have an extra copy ready to go at a separate location. There have been some times where I played the copy and I used Plague of Frogs to pick up the copy, submerge it to further guarantee that my opponent can't get to it on the same region. And it just gets so out of hand when my opponent struggles when they know that I have a second amulet just sitting there.
That placement is important.
Absolutely. And it's also just really ridiculous because, let's be honest, having 3 Ring of Morgan in a deck just seems too ridiculous, right?
I don't want to imagine that.
Yeah, if you don't want to imagine that, how about 3 Philosopher's Stones? Oh, but wait, you're not playing Philosopher's Stone.
I was
Guess
about
what?
to say.
If my opponent is playing Philosopher's Stone, I can take their Philosopher's Stone with Captain Baldassar and Sea Raider and then use these to conjure more copies of them.
No.
Yes, it has happened.
Oh
It has happened. It is ridiculous. And of course, the last card is Mesmerism. I take control of any target nearby minion. So this is ridiculous too whenever I have Morgana Le Fay and I'm able to spread her out in the game, and then I can use her to cast Mesmerism to gain control of a nearby minion, and at the same time it's far away from the Golden Harp. But again, it's just really good when I have Sea Raiders, Captain Baldassar, and Mesmerism. I'm essentially stealing my opponent's strategies, using it against them, while simultaneously using Sorcerer to give me such an abusive card advantage to where I just game warp the entire game.
That is crazy,
It
dude.
is insane. So that's it for my main spellbook, and we'll get on to the Atlas.
Didn't you play Love Potion and some other stuff during test playing?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I did. I decided to not really go with those strategies. So first off, I played Love Potion, I played Scavenging Fiend, I played Mesmerism, and I played Infiltrate. The problem with a lot of those cards is that Scavenging Fiend is only as good if you have artifacts in your cemetery, right? And Love Potion is only as good if your opponent actually has minions that you can gain control of. And then finally, Infiltrate is only really good if your opponent isn't playing Watchtower. Because of the new FAQ update, really Infiltrate is worded that you gain control of the minion for as long as it has stealth, not for whenever it deals damage. So if my opponent plays something like Hounds Vondaros or Watchtower, Infiltrate's just kind of pointless. I'm spending 4 mana just to gain control of a minion for like a millisecond, and then if it's nearby either of those cards, it loses the stealth and I lose control over it. Why I play the one Mesmerism is because it's the true guaranteed way where I can gain control of a minion whenever I see fit, and at the same time, it's not so much mana like Love Potion. So I kind of warped the game strategy a little bit to that. But yes, I was originally playing those, and I felt as though not every deck is going to play minions like Archmago, or sometimes even Battle Mage. Like they'll just play a lot of burn spells, but they won't actually play enough minions for you to actually gain control of them. So I switched that strategy practically immediately after test playing. Going into my sites, I'm playing the Color Out of Space, Boneyard, Tadpole Pool, and of course, Smokestacks of Nog. Oh, whoops. Got a few more uniques. I'm just going to go over each of these as I can. So Color Out of Space, of course, facilitates my threshold, and it's the best way how I can get my air. Boneyard is fantastic because I'm able to bring back a minion from the cemetery. This is also really good sometimes against Death Speaker, because sometimes they will banish their minion to bring it back, and then they'll empty their graveyard. And then when I play Boneyard, it's usually just only me that's permitted to bring back a minion. Tadpole Pool, it's essentially another Plague of Frogs, but I'm able to just summon 3 frogs while also getting Water Threshold. And sometimes just having these submerged is really good. Smokestacks, for some people who are playing Tri-Sites or that are playing Color Out of Space, a lot of people say, oh, well, Earthquake just destroys those. Because unfortunately, Color Out of Space has to be near a void, and the Tri-Sites have to be in a back row. But Earthquake rearranges them to where they can't provide those thresholds. With Smokestacks, the problem is, though, is that this negates all sites' abilities. So what that means is if Smokestacks is near the Color Out of Space or Tri-Sites, I will still have the threshold because it's negating this problematic card effect. So even if my opponent, like if I have Smokestacks, and even if my opponent rearranges my Tri-Sites, Smokestacks is normally always going to be nearby them, and no matter what, I'm always going to have the threshold that I need.
That's really good, actually.
It's so good, and there's so many sites that need to be negated. Like they need to lose their abilities because they're too powerful. That being said, I want to play Joyous Garde, which is a tri-site, but I actually just don't have an extra one, so I wasn't able to incorporate it in this deck, but eventually I might. But regardless, I felt like Color Out of Space is just the better one regardless. And, you know, if you guys decide on playing this deck and if you guys want to incorporate it, I highly suggest doing so. I have Fields of Camlin. This is a ridiculous and powerful card. It gives you Fire Threshold, and with the 3 in Genesis, each player chooses one of their minions and kills the rest. So this is essentially a board sweep for free, and it's just ridiculous because sometimes my opponent will overextend and have too many minions in play. I'll have 1 minion in play, right? But here's what's really ridiculous. My opponent will spend cards to destroy my minions, lowering their hand size, while I use Sorcerer to draw more cards. And then guess what? When they overextend, Fields of Camlin resets the board, but the only significant difference is, yeah, we each have 1 minion, but now I have more cards in my hand, while my opponent has less cards in their hand. And this is why I really wanted to play Sorcerer. Just the attrition alone in card advantage is just absolutely insane. So lastly, I have Mirror Room. So Mirror Room just comes in play as a copy of any nearby site. which is fantastic if I want to reactivate any of these Genesis abilities, but it's also really good for facilitating my threshold, or sometimes even copying my opponent's sites as well. The best site that I want to copy here is Sinkhole. I don't play Roots of Yggdrasil, and the only reason why is because of just the fact that I need to get my threshold on board, and I don't really want to destroy a lot of my setup. This deck does take a minute to set up, but with Sinkhole is perfect for disrupting my opponent's setup by destroying their sites, ruining their threshold, and at the same time just being able to lower their mana cost. Sinkhole is ridiculous because I'm able to still play my cards, spend its mana, and then before the end phase, I'm able to destroy my opponent's site, and then I put them behind a turn. That's just ridiculous if I'm drawing more cards with Sorcerer and just playing their cards with Sea Raiders and so forth. I have Wizard's Den and Valley of Delight. Valley of Delight is just literally in here to fix my threshold, but Wizard's Den, this card is ridiculous. So it has the Genesis ability to draw a spell, and then I discard a spell when this site is successfully attacked for the first time. Why this is so good is because I will deliberately leave this open for my opponent to strike it just so I can discard a card. Why? Because there are some times where I do want to discard a Death Dealer, and then I want to play a Lady of the Lake to bring back the Death Dealer. Yeah, exactly. And even better, right? I can discard Morgana Le Fay or Death Dealer and then use Boneyard to bring them back. So yes, this is a sort of combo piece with these cards, and it's okay if I discard a card. I'm not really against that. Sorcerer is just going to give me back that card advantage anyways, but it's significantly game impacting if I'm able to bring back the card that I discarded. And I absolutely love Wizard's Den for that. It makes you think for a second, like your opponent will think, hey, I'm getting an advantage by discarding a card, but really they're doing themselves more harm than good because I'm able to bring those cards back. For my dual sites, I have 3 Ruins, 3 Lighthouse, 3 Oasis. Pretty standard for my sites. Of course, the Oasis is the most important one, but these are just great too because I'm able to get my air threshold situated. Another quote-unquote dual site that I have is Floodplain. So this is actually a combo piece in a deck as well. So if I happen to have Ruins with this, I can flood the Ruins, thus getting myself the 2 water threshold that I need, while also getting the other thresholds. And that's actually why I have like Ruins first, is because essentially this could be a tri-site without any downside or consequences. Floodplain is great against Root Spider, so if their Root Spider is burrowed, or just any burrowed minion for that matter, I can flood that site, and then since they don't have Submerge, they essentially die. It's also a guarantee that I can flood my opponent's site just so I can summon a Logbog Cat to my opponent's site, because it can be summoned to any water site.
Oh man, that's really good, man.
Yeah, Floodplain is actually just so good and just really in here to help my water threshold out and so forth. It's just so good. Another ridiculously good card, and it took me a while to realize how good this card was, is a Troll Bridge. So Trowbridge says the first time a lone enemy enters this site for the first time, this site strikes it, or my opponent discards a card. So why this is really good is because if my opponent has a weaker minion, let's say like a Violent, right? If they enter the Troll Bridge, and let's say for instance this had Submerge, and if they try to enter it from lower, this will still attempt to strike it.
Really?
Yeah, so now my opponent's left with a decision. They either have to let their minion die because it's taking 3 damage, or they have to discard a card.
That's a really good card. I kind of want one now.
Oh yeah. Last sites in the deck, I have one of each desert. I feel like since I'm playing Violent, I just absolutely need to play a desert, because being able to summon a Violent, dish out 2 damage, and then play a desert to deal an additional 3rd damage is just so good. And at the same time, it fixes my threshold. And sometimes my opponent will have a Apprentice Wizard or a Foot Soldier token, and this is just able to dish out 1 damage to kill all of them. So there you have it, guys. This is my Water, Fire, Air Sorcerer Control deck. I guess that's what we're going to be calling it now.
So what cards or strategies did you struggle against?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. Of course, Atlantean Fate and Poison Nova can be a hindrance sometimes, shutting down my threshold or killing a bunch of minions at once. I usually try my best not to overextend with placing so many minions on the board, but usually I try to do a good job at drawing a bunch of cards to prepare for that. So even if they do board sweep, I'm able to just recover from that. Besides that, Bower of Bliss can be kind of annoying sometimes. I do play a bunch of mortals that have good effects, but I also have other minions in here that aren't mortals, and even if, like, Seasoned Sellsword, for example, loses her ability, I can still attack with her for 4 damage. And besides that, maybe Disenchant and Dispel. Destroying my artifacts is always just a thumbs down, but, for the most part, this deck does a decent job at controlling the board, having answers for follow-ups, and I think that's the most important thing. If you're playing this type of list, you shouldn't be losing the Poison Nova, you shouldn't be losing the Bower of Bliss. There shouldn't be a moment where your opponent plays one card that game warps the entire game, except for Ring of Morgan or Amulet of Niniane. But in this list, you do have answers for almost anything. It just comes down to timing and preparation.
Are there any changes that you plan on making?
Yeah, of course, when Gothic comes out, I'm going to have to up my deck to 60-40, so I'll, of course, have to make necessary adjustments then. I'm probably going to figure out a way how to squeeze in Free City, and if I can up my air threshold, I'd love to play Arcane Barrage. I think it's the best burn spell. And then I may just add in a Browse, but again, only if I'm able to get control of my threshold.
So, where the hell can I get Jeff Rosado?
Oh, you want an alter?
Yeah.
From the Jeff Rosado himself?
The Jeff Rosado.
Well, stay tuned, because there may be an opportunity for one lucky viewer to earn one of these awesome altars. And I will give you guys more information on that later on. The only way how you guys are going to find out is if you stick around for more content.
Awesome list, Jeff.
Thank you.
Is there anything you want to add before heading out?
Yeah. First and foremost, thank you so much to my viewers. There was a moment where I thought like maybe I wasn't going to continue with Sorcery, let alone with content. It means so much to me that you guys stuck around even after my hiatus. It means so much to me, sincerely. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Big X, for doing this for me.
No problem.
And yeah, like, comment, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned for more content. And as always, have an awesome week.